who people are in reality is really sort of secondary to what they're cultivating as this person online.
Healthcare is the number one cause of people going bankrupt. That's the number one cause of everything. Like, fuck the mortgages, it's healthcare.
It's almost similar to, you know, the school shooters and all that. All right, what are you guys doing with this guy? You're going through his whole life story as if this guy is, you know, the next revolutionary, and it's like, how do you think that's going to affect the next person who's thinking about doing something like that?
When you're rejecting claims, and they know that, right? And they make enough money, and then all of a sudden you're rejecting a father that's in like stage 4 and he's gonna die in like 2 months, and then you're rejecting him from treatment. Isn't that the same thing, but at a mass scale?
The people who don't have diverse friendships and they don't know people and they haven't been in other places, they're the ones who are yelling and screaming the most, going, you can't say that. It's like, well, I have a friend who's black, or I have a friend who's Hispanic, and we rag on each other all the time, and it's fine. It's really funny. It's brought us closer together. Fuck off.
Nowadays, people just vote to spite the other party.
Oh yeah.
Like, that's how people vote now.
Yeah. I value articulation and intelligence and trying to talk about and debate things in a very intellectual manner, which is very rare these days. The problem comes where it's, okay, so who is right and who... We have this thing where it's like someone has to be right and someone has to be wrong.
All right, today's show is going to be a little different. You know, I like to delve into like different topics. Usually this is like a martial arts self-improvement podcast, but I'm sure we're going to tie in like the self-improvement, you know, somewhere in this discussion. But I have my very good friend Brian here, and we're going to talk a little bit, you know, about politics, just to have a discussion about current events. So my first question, man, would be to you, is that I was thinking about this a lot, man, because I kind of gone through it when I was a kid myself, and it's kind of ongoing, but I feel like it went like 0 to 100 real quick because of the social media age. Why do you think? Because to me, I think like young, depressed men that don't know what they're quite doing in life yet, whether they want to go to school or not, and they have no direction, like they're trying to find like a girlfriend, whatever. Why do you think it's harder for them? Like, why did the men leave the left and like kind of go to the right? And what I mean by that is like, you know, going towards like the Andrew Tate, hyper masculine, like alpha dog shit.
Well, I mean, did they really leave? You know, that's kind of my question. So, you know, what I think is, I look at, you know, we're in the same sort of, you know, generational cohort here. We're, you know, in our later 30s. When we were growing up, you know, the cool thing to do, or, you know, the cool guys were always the macho men, the jocks, you know, the sports guys, all that. And, you know, like you said, it did sort of start to shift in the, I don't know, I would say like 2010s is when you really sort of saw it,
Right.
When it became sort of popular to be, you know, just things that back in the day we would consider you're being a pussy, which would be, you know, vegetarianism, caring about the environment, stuff like that. What I think, though, really is, which is good.
Yeah.
They're good things.
Yeah.
However, I'm saying, you know, when we were growing up, it was not. If one of your friends was like, "Yeah, I'm a vegetarian," okay.
You mean it's more of a signaling thing now, other than it is like you truly believe in it, right?
Exactly.
Right.
And I think that's exactly what happened. Was dudes who were, you know, in college in their early 20s started going, you know, okay, what's going on here? These girls are not liking this type of guy anymore. How do we get laid? How do we get girls? Well, we have to act like this. And it's very simple. And I think that's really the sort of foundation of where that occurred. And I know it sounds a little crude, but, you know, it is what it is. And I think that a lot of guys felt a lot of pressure to, you know, or not display their masculinity so much, or there would be societal consequences, which would be public shaming and stuff like that, you know?
Yeah. And the talk of like, the Me Too movement, of course, right? You think that had a lot to do with it?
Oh, for
because
sure.
How men would be afraid to approach. Interesting statistic before I get into it any further is that I think this probably is swayed, but the majority of your relationships was, I think, at 2/3 meeting someone physically. And of course, this is like before technology was really on the rise, right? Like you meet your coworker and then it just naturally commingle. You commingle with them and then, yeah, take them outside work. But then now it's just, Sexual harassment? What's the cross borderline between like what you can say and what can you not say?
Yeah.
Right. And I think that has a lot to do with it too, possibly.
Mm-hmm.
You know? And I think dating apps, they suck. Just based on my experience, you know. I mean, I know some people meet their partners over there, but as far as for me, it's just I don't want to say like accessible because you can use it to your advantage, I guess. And I know that's being like contradictory, but it's just so much like, oh yeah, 3 prompts, 4 profile message. It's just superficial, right? Like,
Yeah.
that's really what it is.
Well, but I think that's sort of geared towards what people want now is the online persona is sort of king, you know. Who people are in reality is really sort of secondary to what they're cultivating as this person online. I think that it's the same thing with TikTok, you know. People don't want to watch, you know, lengthy stuff and think anymore. They want to see quick stuff. So if you could go on an app and see pictures of whoever you're attracted to and just literally swipe through them one after one, you know, that's pretty conducive to what people are doing now. So, and yeah, when you do that, of course, you're going to get, I was on dating apps for a while too. And I did meet my future wife on a dating
The
app.
majority now.
But
yeah,
the experience overall was pretty frustrating because it's just, there's too many choices and people want too much. And, you know.
Yeah, it's also the statistic. I heard the statistic where it's like the 10% of guys get all like the top whatever of women because everyone wants that guy.
Yeah.
So for the other like 90% of average quote unquote dudes, I guess, you know, that aren't like tall, good looking and stuff like that. I know we're getting to like the manosphere, red pill kind of stuff, but I think that's pretty accurate, to be honest. You know, it's like, I think certain women, not all of them, they have this like kind of like, oh yeah, you know, since I'm like a woman, I could get that. But everyone's pushing for that top 10% guy.
Yeah.
So I think that's like part of the problem. And, you know, that's how it works. I think that's how it was like set up to be, honestly.
Yeah.
You know, just to keep you on that app and keep you swiping, I guess.
Oh, yeah. And, you know, inevitably what happens is even those top 10% guys, you know, that's a subjective, I mean, people fluff themselves up so much on social media and dating apps and what have you that it's impossible to tell who a real person is until you meet them. And even when you meet normal people in normal circumstances, you're not going to like a lot of them. So when you run into these people on the apps, it's the same thing. It's you cultivated this online personality, and that's who is representing you. And then when you go meet up in reality, it's the real you, and everyone's, oh, well, who's this? You know what I mean? So
I want to ask you, like, from your own point of view. I know you just said that you met, you know, your relationship now that you have now. How was it for you before then? You know, can you kind of like think back and give me an insight of what you were feeling? Like, was it hard for you to go on actual dates and meet people? That's why you turned to dating apps. You know what I mean? Like before you met your lovely soon-to-be wife or, you know, relationship. Whatever.
Yeah, thanks, man.
Yeah.
You know, I was sort of, I was very skeptical of dating apps just because I just don't really like that whole, I don't even have social media, you know? So I'm not really technologically
Yeah, when I tried to tag you, I was like, wait a minute, he doesn't.
So I mean, like yeah, you know, so what it was though was, I think it was towards the later end of COVID. You know, Kumi was shut down for like a year and a half. So I was not working for a year and a half. And I remember I went out on a few like normal dates, just from friends of friends and all that kind of stuff and meeting up. But once COVID hit, I was living by myself. I was, you know, like, you know, really starting to feel the burn of being alone. So yeah, I went on, I think Bumble was the first one I tried. And that one is, you know, really cool because there's no pressure on the dude, really. It's like the woman is the one who has to make the first attempt.
Yeah.
So, you know, I was like, okay, this is kind of cool. Met some chicks, I think like the first 2 or 3 I didn't even meet up with in person, you know, because it's just a revolving door.
Yeah, that's exactly
crazy.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah. And so, and then I was like, okay, this is weird, you know. And then I joined Hinge or something. Yeah, Hinge. And I went out with like 2 girls on that one and just wasn't really feeling it. And yeah, it was very frustrating and it was very not fun in my opinion.
I think the majority of it too is just a numbers game. That's what makes it so hard. So first you have to get the date. You have to get them to agree to go out with you, right? And then some of them you get catfish. Some of them they don't respond. Some of them ghost you. And even if you do meet someone lovely, there's just all these like little qualms and shit that you have to go through. They might not like you. You might not like them. You know what I mean? So it is a numbers game.
It is.
Yeah.
I think the main thing is just it gets you more exposure to more people, and the more of that you have, the more likely you are to meet someone you're compatible with,
Yeah.
But yeah, it sucks. Dating sucks in general, really. I was never that dude who liked to go out and date, I'm like a one girl kind of dude. And,
Yeah.
you know
I
what
mean, you spend a lot of energy.
Yeah,
over
it's
an
very
outcome that you don't know. You know what I mean?
and it's very stressful. And yeah, I could definitely see why a lot of young men would be depressed regarding that today.
Yeah, yeah, because I think they depend on that too for like a certain level of happiness, which makes sense because that's what we're like trajected to do, right? Meet our wife, get kids, picket fence, boom, 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 and all that. So yeah, I mean, I guess back to, but I guess that question I actually got, and I thought about it. That question I got is like, why did men leave the left for the right? Because I think it's because of that wave of, like I said, the whole red pill, Andrew Tate kind of hyper masculine kind of thing, which I think kind of goes, honestly, in my personal opinion, goes along with the whole right wing or like MAGA stuff. Where, of course, what's going on the left, where it's like, know, the LGBTQ and woke culture and all that stuff. Not that nothing wrong with LGBTQ. It's just, we're gonna get into that into a little bit of the agendas on that.
Yeah.
But so moving on from that, what do you think about the United Healthcare CEO, like the assassination in New York, man? Like, see, so I'll start it off. See, personally, for me, obviously, this is probably an obvious statement, but it's like, from what I hear from the news, he was kind of like commingling, like he was doing shady stuff with stocks and gaining like 150 million off like these like sketchy ass deals, just like what you would expect, I guess. But it's kind of like, wait, does that, and regardless of like the healthcare system, and I'll talk about more about that because I've had certain experiences with that too.
Yeah.
It's like, does that really make you like now a judge, jury, and executioner? Like, you know what I mean? It's just killing a guy. And then you see it on all these comment section. It's like, well, like people, I think it was CNN, Facebook had like 20 of those like fucking smiling emojis, and they had to take that post down.
Yeah.
Because they were for that. Like they were happy that not happy, maybe that's the wrong word, but they were kind of like, like, what do you think was going to happen kind of deal, right? So,
even though half of them are probably covered under United.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which, we'll get into too, because that's a good point. What do you think about that whole thing, man? Just your thoughts on it.
Well, I mean, I understand, the symbolic act. This guy, what was his name?
Brian,
Luigi Malgioni or something like that.
Malgioni,
yep. There are always going to be young college kids who view themselves as, almost revolutionaries in a way. I mean, this guy obviously wanted to gain some sort of fame or some sort of notoriety for doing that.
Sure.
And I think that
at first I didn't think he was going to get caught.
He was like at a McDonald's or something. I mean, this guy's a retard.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I mean. I was like, wait a minute, it's been a few days, and then he got caught at a McDonald's?
Yeah, and he's like, on renting e-bikes or something. I mean, there's trails everywhere you go. But I think that, again, then you'd have to question, okay, did he subconsciously maybe want to get caught? So, you know what I mean?
Sure.
But I think that, and this type of stuff has happened all the time. It reminds me of on the other side where right wingers would go and kill abortion doctors. There always is this sort of
interesting.
There has to be this sort of like sacrificial act for your party or for that represents your party or whatever. And in this case, it's this kid wanted to even on the bullets. I think it had the it was delayed, deposed, or whatever.
That's right.
You know what I mean? So there was he knew that this was going to be a big thing, and he wanted it to be a statement. He wanted it to be a symbol of, oh, you know, and look at what happened. I mean, the people reacting are saying he's a martyr basically because he did this.
Yeah, and just on a side note, like I guess from what I've seen, he came from like a wealthy family, and he was like he had a book with him talking about like some killings or something like that.
Oh, really?
Or, not killings. I don't want to. He had like a book. Probably should have done. Yeah, he had just some like random book with him that was kind of related towards like, you know, killing and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So you're right. Like he wanted some notoriety and all the.
He wanted to fight the man. He wanted to fight the system, which all these kids want to do. And unfortunately, this guy, Brian, something from United. He was the target. It could have been so many other people. I mean, it was just
the CEO of United Healthcare, though. Like, yeah, it could have been so many people, but fuck. I mean, I think and before we move on to that, the United Healthcare thing, I think they're the ones that reject the most claims.
Yeah.
And a statistic is that healthcare is the number one cause of people going bankrupt. Right, like that's the number one cause of everything. Like, fuck the mortgages, it's healthcare because they're paying all these claims, and then last minute they get rejected because of a certain like small stipulation. It's like, nope, you've been paying $400 a month, you know, for yourself, or you've been paying thousands a month for your family, and now your kid gets cancer, and then all of a sudden, no, we can't, dude. Sorry, like because you didn't pay for this 1 month and you were late or some shit. You know what I mean? It was just like something minor. So
I'm not. Of course, I don't believe that what the guy did was right.
Sure,
I mean, that's insane. Yeah. However, obviously the healthcare system has its flaws. I mean, I just canceled my health insurance because it was dog shit. So me
and you were talking about
over $300 a month, and it's like I don't.
Crazy.
And so I understand the frustration, but to do something like that is, and again, what's funny to me is, and I know we're trying to stay a little bit away from politics and all that, but
it's okay.
What it is for the reaction that those people get is it's almost similar to the school shooters and all that. Well, we don't want to give them any notoriety, so we're not going to say their name. Well, that's good. All right, what are you guys doing with this guy? You're going through his whole life story as if this guy is, the next revolutionary. And it's like, how do you think that's going to affect the next person who's thinking about doing something like that?
Yeah.
He's going to go, okay, this is cool. Let me go target, the CEO of whatever, this company. Oh, we're mad at them. Let's go get them.
It's true, but I'm sure you know why, right? Because it's such a big story. And
of course.
It's out there, and it's the CEO of healthcare. And
they
made it a thing.
That is true, but that's also true for right-wing news like Fox and all that. So what it really is it's in alignment with their values, which is healthcare should be either free or heavily subsidized by the government, like all these other liberal countries. And this young kid did something good for the cause.
Right.
That's what
the narrative, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or that could be the narrative, but it could also be that's how they feel in their political views.
Yeah.
Which is crazy. I mean, I think there was a question one time to this was a couple years ago where someone was asking Democrats, if would it be better if Donald Trump was dead, and like over half of them said yes. And then they asked Republicans the same thing, and they're like, no, like, we don't want the guy to die. Are you crazy? Right. So it really does show this sort of extreme thinking where it's all or nothing. Whatever has to do with this side, that is what we're doing. And everyone else is evil. It's crazy, man.
Yeah, and the extreme thinking gets a lot of views.
It does. And it also...
a lot of, revenue.
It does, but it also causes a lot of action.
Yes.
When you look at and you see things like this happening, it's like, wow, really? What was that guy reading and being influenced by leading up to all of that, killing that guy? I mean, it had to be something. He wasn't just going to the park and playing, and you know what I mean? Like there was something. He was heavily influenced by something. So
yeah, there was a good point that I actually saw. This isn't coming from me, but it makes you think. It's like, well, yeah, we're not here for killings, obviously, right? Like we're humane, but Don't you think like symbolically that's not symbolically, but that isn't that what they're doing when you're rejecting a kid that has like some sort of chronic illness to him, and all of a sudden, isn't that like killing at a mass scale, just slowly? You know what I mean? Like when you're rejecting claims, and they know that, right? But and they make enough money, and then all of a sudden you're rejecting a father that's in like stage 4, and he's gonna die in like 2 months, and then you're rejecting him from treatment. Isn't that the same thing, but at a mass scale? Like it's just damn, you know what I mean?
I mean, yeah. I mean, obviously that is a way to look at it. That's because that is the actions they're taking, and that's
again,
the
it's not
result
from
that's
my
happening.
thoughts. It's like, you know what I mean? I was
Oh
just
no,
like,
I totally
it makes
get
you
it.
think. I'm like,
The insurance companies are evil. They're truly evil, and however, I would look to, if I was the CEO of United, how would I try to defend what I'm doing? And I would probably say something along the lines of, well, first off, the claims, the way that they're processed is crazy. It's done with an algorithm. There's not even a person. The person doesn't see it until it's flagged or something like that.
oh yeah.
So
right.
so the reason, and then they set the restrictions for the algorithm. So if they want to tighten it up, then they keep tightening it up, which is what they were doing, I guess. Now, for them, they could sit there and say, "Oh, we don't even see the claims." So while the people are sitting there going, "Oh, there's a father at stage 4, he's going to die." They don't see that. They
Right.
see numbers of pages, and that's it. And the CEO, I guarantee, does not have any connection with people who are getting covered or not. So it's a very I think they distance themselves very far from that aspect of it. And and it's horrible, and I'm not trying to say it's right, but
Sure.
I think that's where they're going and all that.
Yeah, I think in their like world, it's not like the obligation, right? It's like any other job, I think. Like,
Yeah, exactly.
Because you say it's like they're just looking at the data.
It's just a business
They're
to them.
going, yeah, and then and to that, it's kind of like some people just work there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's not the whole healthcare. It's the healthcare system, but it's just you can't blame one particular thing.
I don't. Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
it's just like
it's the
yeah,
system
too
as a
much.
whole.
Yeah, it's a system as a whole.
The way it is, and it's unfortunately the way it is, and
Yeah, and if people think like we can talk about like healthcare reform, if people think that they can fix it, I don't think they know what they're talking about because there's so much into it, right?
I agree.
Like if we were go down the line, it was like really like how to fix healthcare all of a sudden, like that's
Yeah.
a lot to like take on,
That's
probably decades and decades of like
well, if you're not like a professional who has been in the healthcare industry and knows the ins and outs,
Yeah.
I mean, we could sit here and chop it up and talk about it all day. Really, we don't truly know the exact nature of how it works. Which the only people who could fix it are those people, and yet the only people who have like real opinions about it are the ones who can't do anything.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah,
a
you're right,
pretty precarious situation. And then, I mean, the amount of money that the healthcare insurances bring in, you can't argue. Both parties can't argue with that. So there's no way it's gonna be significantly reformed.
There's a lot of influence in that.
Of
Yeah,
course.
There's a lot of influence why that's steered. Yeah, but so before moving on, this is kind of obviously there's a lot to cover within an hour, so it's kind of a rapid fire thing. I had a minor setback as of recently, so that's what I wanted to talk about like getting. So I had to take time off work.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you know this, so maybe it's the first time you're hearing it now, but one of the reasons for that is to get Medicaid. So I had no idea about Medicaid, right? Like I was never like looking towards that, but life happens. And so I got advice. I was like, man, I got to get insurance. I'm wrangling, right? Like I'm like, oh yeah, you might not get it because there's an enrollment like kind of deadline and all that stuff. I knew about that, but I was like, well, this is a dire situation here.
Yeah.
And right. And then what I found out was just, oh shit, the system is crazy, man. Yeah. A lot of institutions that can heal you won't accept you because you don't have insurance.
Yeah.
Right. Even no matter how chronic, no matter how fatal it is.
Yeah.
It's just kind of like they'll send you over, they'll pass you on. Oh, we could recommend this. And then if not, you'll get like the lowest care,
Yeah.
right? It's self-pay care. You know what I mean? So what I pretty much had to do was, and thank goodness for this, thank goodness for good people that like inform you. I actually talked to one of the guys in Nevada Health Link, and he was like, oh, wait, oh, so you're not working, right? And no one had told me this prior. He was just some random sales guy.
Yeah.
And again, fortunately, I had him because he was like, wait a minute, man. Wait, you're not working? Dude, you could qualify by like November 1st for Medicaid, and they like pretty much pay for everything.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? As long as you reach under this amount, right? And then you could qualify for it. And then after like what I just said, like you're getting tossed around, right? You're in like this crazy situation where it's about your health. I'm like, oh my goodness, thank you. So I got lucky. Like, you know, but saying all that, people might not be. What if it ended up the other? What if he didn't tell me that?
Yeah.
And then I had to get an independent insurance, which I wasn't qualified for, and I had to wait for enrollment. And considering the situation, it could probably have worsened.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's just a tricky situation. Like you learn to when you're in it, that's when you really find out about like, oh, this is fucked.
Yeah.
No one gives a shit.
They don't.
Like you're just another one. I always thought like whatever I had, because I dislike it. I have like a certain health, issue. I always thought when you get that, like people will cater to you because it's something serious. It's kind of like, oh crap, man. Like, yeah, let's get you here. Let's get you there. But you're just another cog in the wheel, brother. Like, when you go through these things, when you go through like the hospitals and stuff like that, it's like you're number one, you're number two. It's kind of like you have a prison kind of number here. That's what you are, man. Yeah. And then,
it's crazy because, and of course, dude, my deepest, condolences for having to go through that because it sucks. And I'm really glad that you were able to get,
I got lucky,
the treatment that you needed.
I got fortunate.
Really. And it's crazy because if you would have paid for private insurance, even then you still would have had to pay at the best 20% of it, which is going to be crazy amounts of money.
An IV's like 10 G's.
Yeah. And what it is well, at least for me, I grew up with this idea almost as like this fantasy of like, what if you get hurt, you call 911, they come pick you up. Like it's almost like this like very, comforting idea that whenever you're hurt or whenever something happens to you, you will be taken care of. And and when it really does happen, you learn it's not the case at all.
It's the other way.
Yeah. And then or they treat you and then they're just like begging you for money and hounding you. It's like, whoa, what happened?
Yeah.
So
bro. My friend recently told me at Sunrise Hospital, actually, like he just got he's an RN over there, a nursing job. They're closing the doors because it's getting filled up so much. But the point, they're kicking people out like at a fast rate, even though they have a serious condition. Like in the ICU, they're trying to get them to the right rooms and be like, dude, he has no insurance, kick him the fuck out.
It's crazy.
It's like, what do you want me to, you know what I mean? And then he's saying to himself, just like from a moral, ethical standpoint, it's like, what the fuck do you want me to tell him?
Yeah.
Like he's sitting there with an infection in his leg, about to get cut off. He's dying. You know what I mean? And
go home,
you're just
walk
another
it off.
guy. Yeah, walk it off. Yeah. So I think it's just very, very interesting. Like, when you go through the system and then you kind of find out about it.
Yeah.
Like it's just very, in this case, disheartening.
Sucks.
But yeah, exactly. So, all right, man, here's like kind of the big question. Why do you think Trump won by a landslide? There's a lot.
There's multiple reasons for that.
What's your biggest takes on it?
Well, I think number one is obviously this happens all the time where we'll go Democrat, Republican, Democrat. So I think that was a sort of part of the natural shift, especially with JB's deteriorating mental state. I think it was clear that the sort of perception that the Democratic Party knew what they were doing started to really crumble, not only within the right, because obviously the right's always going to root against them, but even within their own supporters were like, wait, what is going on here? Yeah. This guy is not, he shouldn't be there. You know what I mean?
It's still wild to me after all these years. Like how, when I look at the television, and I'm going to say that's kind of why I try to steer off. I know we're talking about politics here, but then that's kind of why I steer away from it. I'm like, this is, a lot of things that I'm seeing is just ridiculous and it's rotting my brain. Yeah. Because it's like, how is this happening? Wait, what? And I'm not an expert, but you know what I mean? It's like, wait, how is this like pretty much, let's call it what it is. He's like, it's senile. Like, he's pretty much senile going up there. And it's fucking obvious when you look at, or when you pay attention close enough, it's like, what? And everyone's talking about it. How is he still up there, bro?
Yeah. To be honest, it was really funny. I really enjoyed it. However, and I mean, that's not to say Trump isn't old and senile and
Sure, he's 80. Yeah.
megalomaniac. He really is, you know, but he's really funny. And I'm not going to get into, you know, all of the actions and all that. However, I will say from like a, you know, an entertainment sort of view, it's just funny that we've got these like two incredibly old white guys that it's just, I don't know. I think I don't try to get too involved in it, you know, but I do think it's funny. With that being said, another reason why the red won this time, you know, in such great numbers is because the issues were not aligned in the Democratic Party. They were all over the board.
Can you give me a little bit of example of that?
Well, so abortion was a huge issue this time around. Abortion and immigration were huge. And unfortunately, I think there was close to 25% of the Democratic Party that voted for the Democratic candidate simply because they rejected the personality of the other candidate.
Sure.
I mean, that's ridiculous, you know. So they weren't voting for the actions they wanted from their party to take, you know, the Harris and party to take. They were voting against Donald Trump.
Yes.
And that's where they fucked up.
Perfect. and you know, before I lose my train of thought on that, that's actually one of my biggest thinkings was nowadays people just vote to spite the other party.
Oh yeah.
Like that's how people vote now.
Yeah.
Sorry, go on.
They have no care or idea about what platforms or policies the candidates are running on. They're, oh wait, which party is she? Okay, well I'm voting for her, or I'm voting for him, whatever it may be. And this is a tale as old as time in terms of, you know, the two-party system we have here.
Sure.
But I think that this one in particular, people were fed up and tired of the left always trying to, you know, demonize every single person without offering any type of real solution for the problem. And that's, you know, like when you look at the Republican voters, their biggest concerns, they were not all over the board. It was immigration and the economy, and that was it. You know,
they're focused on work.
Yeah, they were focused on two specific things, and that was what they platformed on, and that was what they wanted. So, and if the Democratic Party would have done the same thing, they would have gotten way closer, I think, you know? So,
yeah. So do you think it was just, a few thoughts on that. It's just kind of like, well, obviously looking at the numbers, and I think it's a big deal that he won by a landslide.
Yeah.
Not just him winning, that he won by that margin.
Yeah, he took all the swing states.
It just shows that, like, people are fed up, like the past 4 years, and it's going nowhere. And with all this, you know, signaling going on, and not that the right doesn't, but, you know, with all this stuff, they're just sick and tired of it. And again, not just the win itself, but how he won, it shows a lot.
It does.
Yeah. And especially like the demographics of who voted for him, you know, like the Latino. It's like you had speaking of which, you know, you're a big kind of riffing off a little bit, but then you're a big Shane Gillis fan, right?
Yeah,
and remember with that Tony Hinchcliffe thing where he said about the Puerto Rico thing. It's kind of like, oh crap, man. But then a lot of the vote was for Trump. You know,
it was. I don't think that really had a big impact.
It didn't,
you know?
But it was just funny. I thought I'd bring it up.
It's hilarious.
It's like,
what it is it's people I think are starting to see, because you know when cancel culture first came out, it was sharp, it was extreme, it was, oh, if you say anything, you're done. And I think it's really starting to soften up a little bit now, where people are like, okay, look, you could say something offensive or something silly, and you might not be that serious about it, although it is offensive. But that doesn't mean that you hate somebody. You know what I mean? That doesn't mean that it's the end of the world. And I think there's a certain like subset of people, primarily people that are on the left, who are just they're still thinking in that term of black and white, where it's like, no, you cannot say that, or else you're a racist. It's like, well, you don't have to be a racist to make fun of another person's culture. Sure. It's funny, you know, like It is funny. And if you have enough of an understanding and, you know, friendship with other people from other cultures, you don't even think about it. Yeah. And the people who don't have diverse friendships and they don't know people and they haven't been other places, they're the ones who are yelling and screaming the most, going, you can't say that. It's like, well, I have a friend who's black, or I have a friend who's Hispanic, and we rag on each other all the time, and it's fine. It's really funny. It's brought us closer together. Fuck off. You know?
Yeah, and I don't think that's just like the type of friends you have. I think it's the type of things you do too. If you don't have anything going on like significant in your life, it's kind of like, what else are you going to talk about? You want attention for yourself, and that's what makes your like identity, makes you feel important.
Of course.
I think it's like a big one, you know what I
Yeah,
mean?
you're going to point your finger at everyone else, you know, and makes it easier.
Yeah.
So.
What do you think are some other significant points that he won by that much from what you know, kind of seen?
I mean, you know, because if you look back at the 2020 election, he didn't lose by that much. You know what I mean?
Right.
So it's like really. I think that we're at a point in, you know, American history where it's going to teeter almost every 4 years now. It's and if you look back, that's what it does. You know, so I think that there was a lot of backlash from Joe Biden's presidency. That's a big reason. And there was a lot of skepticism and reluctance to trust Kamala Harris as the chief. I think there was that too. I don't think that race or anything or gender had that much of a factor. I really don't, which is what people are saying. Because when you look at exit polls, if people are being truthful in those surveys, they don't say that that was a factor. So, you know, I think that it was just more or less another just 4-year swing. And a backlash to the state of the Dems in that, you know, during that time.
Yeah, and I don't know too much about like Kamala Harris's, let alone Biden. I'm not like a politician again, but then from what you've just seen, when she was going on these like interviews, right? Like, and that's what we're going to talk about next, like the quote unquote podcast election. She went on like Call Her Daddy, and it's never been, and I watched that podcast. Unfortunately. And I was just, damn, it's so, it was like, it was scripted in like the most dumbest way. It was like, wait, this isn't a conversation.
Yeah.
This is a setup to, in like the most, again, and I don't even know how to explain it, in like the most, like set up way where she could answer these questions that didn't even make any sense. Like she made no sense. You know, like when I was like, dude, I had to turn it off like right away. It seems manufactured. It just seemed really manufactured. It was in her like office, and then what behind the scenes, I guess from what I seen, it was like $1 million set just to set it up.
Oh,
like,
I heard about
with
that.
The whole like, you know what I mean? Yeah. It was kind of like a scene out of The View, you know, just kind of like going for that. And yeah, man, I think that, so kind of going off, like I think that had a lot to do with it, because personally, that's what I'm into, is just podcasts. That's all I do. Yeah. And I've seen the JD Vance go on, you know, Joe Rogan and the Theo Von Theo Von's. They did a fucking tour on like the Joe Rogan, Theo Von, Lex Friedman podcast. Like, you know, they're across the board. How much impact do you think that had on that? Because there's some people that say, again, they call it the podcast election, right? Because like we were talking about before, there's the Dems that are thinking this old school stuff. And I think part of that is legacy media. Now, that's not to take away from legacy media, because I know it still has a lot of influence, right? Like the New York Times, Fox News, CNN, and stuff like that. That's still kind of where the money's at. But look where we're headed towards, right? I mean, your YouTube influencer podcaster that's getting millions and millions of fucking views. Even the Call Her Daddy, weirdly enough, that interview, she gets, I think she's number 2 behind Joe Rogan on the Spotify list. Like, it's wild. Like, and I get why they went on there. You know, I think if they did it right, it was a smart move.
Yeah. I think that anytime there's the opportunity to be exposed to a wide audience, it's gonna, you know, and like you said, it used to be CNN, it used to be news outlets. Now, it's the TikTok news. That's what we're doing now. That's the social media news. So, the interesting thing about Trump, though, is that very few politicians recently are able to just really just talk off the cuff and just have a conversation. Yeah. And part of that is due to, you know, people are sort of desensitized to him. Like, all right, well, he's going to say some wild shit. So we're used to it now. Sure. You know, and that took a while to sort of carve out for him. But I think also, people really connected with that, and they're like, wow, you know, this dude's just sitting here like talking real. Like, and I think that although I don't think there were a lot of people that were on the fence, it's like, dude, Trump is a very, very divisive figure. Or if you either like him or you don't like him, I don't think there are a lot of people like, oh, well, should I vote for him? Let me check this podcast out and see. I don't think that was really the case, but I think what it did was it strengthened his supporter base so much more that they really went out and sort of, got the troops going and were like, hey, check this out, man. Like he's a regular dude,
Right.
even though he's not, but I think it really connected with the normal dude.
Yeah, and I think exactly 100%, right on the head. I was watching probably, of course, from a podcast. I forgot from where, but then even like people's moms were like, if they happened to catch a glimpse of like that Joe Rogan podcast that he did in particular, they actually found him kind of admirable and funny.
Yeah.
When after they watched it, because like you said, 100% true. He's just being funny and real. Like, he's such a polarizing figure that it's like, how can you not, like, it's genuine. It's authentic.
Yeah,
It's pretty
that's
genuine.
what it
Like,
is.
oh, okay. Like, he might say some outlandish shit sometimes, but it's still funny. It's still relatable.
He's really funny.
Yeah.
He's really funny. But at the same time, it also, when you look at, and it sucks that we have to use Harris because she's a woman, and it seems like we're bashing her.
Right. And
There are
that's not
plenty
at all,
of
by the
women who
way,
are like qualified,
For fucking sure.
However, her specifically, she had a really hard time with talking off the cuff, with, just giving like an impromptu sort of little speech. She just really had a hard time with that. And when people saw that, it just sown a lot of distrust in them. Like, she seemed very shaky and very iffy and very, like she was hiding something almost. So
Yeah, that's a great point.
it's not going to come across good to someone who's voting.
Okay, so at a grand scale, right? Like with the Dems, it's almost like, wait, no one could have figured that out. No one could be like, hey, this is what you're doing. Is that's
a good point.
Like delusional? Like you have a massive backing behind you. You have a whole fucking party with very intelligent people. In some parts of it, but it's like no one could have told her that. It's kind of like, look, man, a whole group of intelligent people from her party could tell her, listen, it's kind of coming off inauthentic, even if a lot of her stuff is already scripted.
Yeah.
It still just didn't make sense, even though it was scripted.
Yeah.
So no one could have told her, hey, look. Do the hand gestures more. It's kind of like when that Sarah Palin era, like she'd do these winks. At least that was like, okay, you know what I mean? It makes you more likable because, not to go on topic here, when I was reading that book, Psychology of Influence, you're 100% right about how people just vote on people because they think it's like a halo effect, like they look good on camera.
Yeah.
It's not even about their policies. It's just kind of like if they're likable, if you have similarities to them, it's a halo effect.
Yeah.
It's just kind of like, okay. But no one could have told her that, man. No one was like, dude, you're boring. Like, you're boring the people. Like,
oh, man,
you're being disingenuous.
I'm sure that during some of her interviews and speeches, people from her staff were slamming their heads against desks, like going, what the fuck is she doing? So I think that they probably did try to tell her, and I'm sure she did a lot of coaching and training and all that. You can't really fake authenticity. You know what I mean? Or you can't really script that type of connection with another person, with a viewer. So I think that was where, not necessarily she failed, but she just wasn't that type of person. I don't think she could have been. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
but
that's
even
it.
before that, it's almost like, wait, I guess she was next up, right? Okay. I was like,
Well,
you
I
couldn't
think
pick another fucking.
Well, that's the thing is that, when everything happened, when was it, like in June or July or something, right after, like a few months after Trump got shot, when Biden finally stepped down or whatever, they didn't have very many choices, man. And that was the biggest thing that screwed the Democrats this past election, was changing Joe Biden and not doing it way, way sooner than they did.
Agreed.
And that's, and then they threw Harris in there, and they were deluded and they were very arrogant in thinking that, oh, well, here we go. We'll put her in, one Dem is just as good as the next and they'll get all the support. And, she got less than like 1% of the vote in the primary,
Yeah.
So it's like, all
that's
these
a
people
landslide.
gave Joe millions of dollars and they're like, okay, now vote for Harris. And they're like, no, like that's not what we paid for. So,
And I get it in a way because that like culture, quote unquote, the cancel culture, whatever the movement was so powerful, right? Like businesses got behind it. There's a
Yeah.
lot of funding behind that,
Oh,
and
yeah.
that's how you just make your money to ride that wave. You see the movies nowadays with, again, I'm all for female empowerment. That's completely fine. And as a matter of fact, it's great that, like, I think a statistic that I had are like more women are like outpacing men to graduate college and have great careers, I guess. Or something
That's
like
been the
that, right?
case
Like,
for a long time now.
right. Okay. Yeah.
More
yeah,
women have more degrees.
yeah,
than
that's great.
men.
Yeah. yeah, good for them. You know what I mean? And yeah, that's not to say, yeah, but then that wave of like just that, it's like, yeah, let's get behind this because there's so much momentum going
Yeah.
towards it about like, you know, putting it in movies and Hollywood and, you know,
Oh,
the
yeah.
whole Disney debacle and all that stuff, which is wild. So
Well, then you get what's her name, Bonnie Blue, who just sets them back 30 years by banging like what was it, 1,000 something dudes in an hour.
oh, really?
Or in a day or something.
I didn't see that, man.
Oh, she put it. She had sex with over she broke the world record for having sex with
And
over
what
1,000 men in one day, or 12 hours or something.
Oh,
like that.
really?
Yeah.
Oh, geez.
And it's like, okay, is that female empowerment? I don't.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
like,
Not that I would know. It's like the Houston 500 back in like the 90s.
yeah,
Yeah, it's
but
like- don't get me on how I know that. You know what I mean?
it's crazy.
Yeah, yeah. So we were talking about before this podcast, man. You're going through like clinicals, right? Like through, you know, you went through psychology, and now you're going through like what are you doing? I'm sorry.
I'm in the Masters of Social Work program.
Hey, there you go. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why I had a hard time saying that. But we were talking a lot about what's going on and just academia in general, you know, of what you have to go through. Can you explain like some of the qualms that you have to like kind of deal with when it comes to like the culture and quote unquote?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you know, as a straight white male,
Yeah. As a privileged white man.
yeah, as a straight white male, you know, I keep my head down a lot. You know, I'm in it for the degree. I want to, you know, open my own clinical therapy practice. I'm doing it for the degree.
Yeah.
With that being said, yeah, it's very interesting. And I've been going to school for a while now. So since like 2016, I was on and off, and then, you know, it wasn't until like 2020 where I really started, you know, getting everything done. So I've seen a lot of this sort of attitude morph over the years, where it's very, obviously it depends on where you're at. So I go to UNLV, which is like a really liberal campus, you know, so it's very, not cool to
I thought
be.
that was all across the board. Like in just, you know, in
no,
Ivy
I mean,
Leagues
you'll
and,
find some campuses where you'll get a little more,
like Nevada State College. I'm just like
something like that, or you
Yeah.
know, maybe you know, Florida State or whatever might be a little more conducive. But
just joking.
you know, it's tough because it's always been like this, where you have 20-year-old kids go through college. This happened, you know, in Vietnam, where they start protesting and they have to change the world. So like, I think there's like this innate drive in young people to make a huge change on the world.
Yeah.
It's not till you're like 30, 35, where you're like, you know, I'm just going to do me. You know what I mean?
Sure.
You really start to see things. You're like, well, I can't change the world like that.
Right.
You could do things, you know, in nice endeavors and everything, but
It's better just
you
to
get
change
that
yourself,
you get that
probably.
fantasy out of your head where you're like, I'm not really that important. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
that. But when you're young, you really have that feeling, man. And then when you're going through school and you're getting all this information, you're like, oh my God, look at this. Like I could be part of history. You're like, nah, you really can't. But what they have that feeling. So what it is now is, and I'm in a social work program. So it's I would highly doubt one of the people in that entire program of like 1,000 students would be able to say that they support Donald Trump or they support the right or something like that. Or it'd be very few people,
Yeah.
you know? So you have a huge culture of just everyone who is a minority is, oh, they're so great. And, you know, we cannot say anything bad about them. And, you know, it feels like just sort of walking on eggshells all the time, where it's like, I just, you know, really don't say anything.
Right. But then when you do,
When I do, so at first, what's funny, this is funny, man, because at
Yeah.
first, you know, I was like, fuck that. Like, and I would go on rants, you know. And I really sort of learned how to clean it up where, well, the first thing I started doing was I stopped defending any type of politician or political view or party or whatever have you. I stopped defending those because it's a pointless waste of time and you're just going to make enemies and it's not fun.
Sure.
But what I start to do is I really try to, think and really, in a really like articulate way, okay, how could I frame this? Like I was telling you earlier, there was one of the questions was, and this is in talking about ethics and what to do when you have clients and everything. Let's say a client wants you to attend a pride parade with them and they're a part of the LGBT community. And, but however, the school that you work for says you can't do that. It's against your contract and you'll get fired if you do. One of the chicks raised her hand, this white chick who has a bunch of piercings and tattoos and weird hair and all that. I would quit immediately. I wouldn't work for that school. That how dare they try to, oppress my view of, supporting LGBT people. And, I said, wow, that's very one-sided. And, but however, a lot of the people seem to agree, I raised my hand. I said, well, what if your client wanted to attend a MAGA rally and go to like a Donald Trump speech, but your school wouldn't allow it? Would you quit then? Would you protest at the school? She said, absolutely not. I'm glad that they have that policy or whatever. Mm-hmm. And it just really shows this just huge separation between what people really think is happening and what actually is happening.
Yeah.
And which is a lot of people have very extreme views and those views are then perpetuated by the media because, like you said, it gets views, it gets likes and all that kind of stuff. And it's a cool thing to care for oppressed people at this time right now.
Sure.
And if you don't, you're racist and you're a horrible person, and which is obviously true. But where I go to school, it's very prominent and it's very, very out there.
What are some of I know from knowing you, and we don't have to go into it. Like I said, we don't want to get into the rabbit hole of things, but knowing you, you're a pretty I guess you could say outspoken might be the wrong word, but you have a lot of thoughts on it, right? That we've talked about, and we don't have to talk about it in this podcast. But then you are very opinionated in how you think and what you do. What are some of the backlashes that you have? Like, has anyone spoken out against you? Be like, "Hey, you're a fucking misogynist, fucking,"
Yeah.
Like not misogynist, but you know what I mean. It's kind of like, wait, who do you think you are, man?
Yeah,
with your opinions.
Well, that's the thing is I don't really, when I'm in places like school or at my agency or whatever, I don't really espouse those opinions so freely.
Sure.
I've learned how to sort of tone it down and not really test the waters first and see how it is. I joke a lot, I say a lot of wild shit just because I think it's really funny. Doesn't necessarily mean I totally believe in it.
It's true, but being funny has to be, there has some truth to it, right?
Of course,
like we all know. That's why it makes it funny.
Of course, I like just pointing out the absurdity of things from both, in terms of politics, from both sides.
Absolutely,
because it's crazy. And however, I do lean a certain way, and I'm not going to deny that. But I do think it's important to, especially as I've gotten older and the career path that I'm choosing, which is to help people in therapy. I've learned how to just try to be a lot smarter about it to the people that, like with you, of course, I'm going to fuck around and tell all my friends I'm going to tell wild shit.
And everyone does it.
Yeah, of course.
Like even the most conservative, like.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so, but when I'm, in public discourse or whatever you want to call it, I value articulation and intelligence and trying to talk about and debate things in a very intellectual manner, which is very rare these days.
You mean just to listen to each other?
In a way exactly. Just to talk about it in a way that doesn't really stoke the fire so much, because it's hard to talk about stuff, especially in college, about immigration or abortion. It's hard to talk about things because they're very hot button issues and people are uncomfortable to talk about them. I want to talk about them, and I think that if you could come up with a way to not be so biased and not be so opinionated and say, oh, even if I'm talking to someone who's, from the left or something, try to frame it in a way that they understand it.
Yeah.
And if you could do that, it's very powerful, and it's like, oh, okay, cool. You know what I mean? Like, so later in my life, I've started to realize that that's the route that I want to take.
Yeah, that's great. That's really, really great to hear. I think being empathetic is a part of it, right? Like that's pretty much what you just said. It's like you have to see things from, like, of course, their point of view. You can't just go off like
it's
going
funny
crazy with your views. Like,
exactly, yeah. But again, there's a strong difference, man, between if I'm like talking about something real serious, I'm gonna, which I rarely do because I always sort of use humor as I use dark humor as like a very defensive mechanism, So it's hard for me to take things really seriously. It really is, man. There are a few things, of course, that I stand by, but other than that, dude, I really don't. I don't really care.
Yeah, right.
It's
like it is what it is. Like
it is
the
what
policies
it is,
are
man.
in place, and
it's whatever.
And again, like what I was mentioning before, it's kind of like you want to change the world, well, change yourself, right?
Oh, for sure, yeah. Or change reframe the way that you're looking at the world.
Sure,
because it's not, it's. You're not going to, and especially when you're talking about like changing someone else's mind or trying to convince or persuade, it's a useless effort.
100%.
There's just no reason to do it.
Yeah, exactly.
That's why if you could like carefully craft an argument that another person who doesn't agree with those views could say, ooh, interesting. That's cool. That's like, wow, you got some skill. And that's where I'm trying to go.
But they also have to agree to that.
Of
like,
course.
They always have to make up their mind about like, I'm going to listen to this guy.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Which is hard too.
Exactly. And 100%. I agree. That brings me to a quote. It's kind of like, think about how hard it is to change yourself. How do you think you're going to change another person, right? Like through your words. It's like, it's nearly impossible.
It is.
They have to make that choice for themselves to listen. And also, it's hard when you're arguing something. I think I heard this on Big Think so that I can give them the credit. But it's hard for some people, it's hard to argue against one another just because it fucks with their identity, and people have a hard time. I guess you could say ego. They have a hard time kind of like, nah, because it's already in them. It is what they embody.
Yeah.
It is their idealism. It is like everything about them. Mm-hmm. And to be able to pierce through that veil, I guess you could say, is an impassable task. So pretty much I'm just like saying I'm just reiterating what we just said.
For sure. But what it is you're totally right, where people have, their identity is wrapped up in those certain beliefs. And it's kind of like a Buddhist sort of concept where you just don't identify with it.
Yeah.
It's okay. You could have beliefs, but when someone starts attacking them, you don't need to identify and defend those beliefs to that person, at least. As long as you know what you believe in, there should be the people that do that the most are the ones who don't really believe in whatever it is, that they're talking about, because that's why they get defensive and that's why they get upset, So I would say don't wrap up your identity in your beliefs, try to keep a little bit of distance from it, and always understand that, it's a useless effort to try to win a fight against somebody in terms of political belief.
I agree. It kind of be like a shapeshifter.
Yeah.
when you're when you're thinking about those ideas and thoughts, right? It's kind of like, it's not the end all be all, man.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I wanted to bring up was like, I think for the most part, Matt, going into a lighter note, when people, even with the most extreme views, I think people are well-intended, I do think people are good generally, like as far as humankind.
I agree.
When they formulate these ideas, I don't think it doesn't come from a random place, right? They believed it from somewhere and then they pushed it out to the world. It's just how they're pushing it out to the world.
Yeah.
It's not random. It's just reasonable in their own eyes. It's like subjective. It's kind of like, well, they didn't just pull it out of their ass and then just start talking shit. You know what I mean? I mean, I guess some people do, but like a very limited, but for the most part, like even the most extreme, whether you're on the left or the right, it's like, it's not random. It maybe came from your childhood and you have good intentions about what you're trying to say and what you believe. It's just Like now you're getting into like echo chambers of like people's other people's beliefs, and then like what we were talking about, you get mixed into the identity politics of things.
Yeah.
You know, which is like I think the main reason for disagreements and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So where do you think like we're almost there, but to kind of land the plane a little bit. So where do you think we go from here, man? As far as like where do you think like the country's going, or what would you hope it would be, for this term, I guess?
I think it's going to be a lot of the same.
Yeah,
Just
right,
moving
right.
forward. It really will
Sure.
be. There's not really, I don't have like a idea or vision for like how the country will be in the next, 10 years or whatever. I think it's going to be a lot of just pushing and pulling on both sides. It's not going to, and to go back to what you just said though, it really is true. We could use a controversial topic like abortion as an example. People on the left, think that abortion is, the justified choice because X, Y, and Z, the parents weren't ready or they don't have the means or whatever have you. And then you look on the right and they think abortion is wrong because it's the murder of innocent babies, and both sides could be right, and I think that that's where you said, most people are good intentioned and all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
The problem comes where it's okay. So who is right and who? We have this thing where it's like someone has to be right and someone has to be wrong. That's not true. You could be right and wrong. There could be aspects of right, aspects of wrong. There's no, we need to stop this whole like split of just thinking about things in this or that way.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Like I was saying, it does. I think it does come from a good place. We just get steered, in the wrong road. We're tribal people. Honestly.
We're herd. We're herd animals.
We're a
dude.
herd. We pick a side.
Yeah, we want to pick a side. Look at football fans. Look at dude. We're crazy. We like to pick a side, and we like to identify with it, and we like to represent it, and it makes us feel better.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's all. That's fine. But just don't take it too seriously. You can't take it that seriously.
Yeah.
There's some guys who go home and smack their wife after their football team loses.
And that's a
insane.
crazy one.
You know what I mean? Same thing for like the results of a presidential election. Like if it really affected you as a person that bad, that you need to look inside and say, okay, maybe there's something else here because it shouldn't be that way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I'm glad you went there, just for a fun topic. That's why, honestly, between me and you, I don't know if I've ever told you this like in person, but that's why I used to be a diehard football fan. And I know that's saying a lot with football fans that it's like, yeah, you used to be a diehard football fan. But then I really was because I played it as growing up and I followed, my team was the Chargers. They moved to LA and stuff like that. I wore the jerseys. I was like, fuck the Raiders, when they were back in Oakland and all that stuff. But saying that, that's what I hated about the culture of the sport. It's kind of like people get too wild with it a little bit. It's like people are, I've heard stories, and particularly why I mentioned I'm a San Diego Chargers, and then the whole AFC rivalry between Raiders and the Chargers. It's like people are getting stabbed at the stadiums for wearing a wrong jersey in their home court, which is like obvious, which is probably like the obvious thing that's going to happen because that's just how it is. But I hated that kind of like tribalism culture. Like, fuck, my team won. And then we're both, kind of like in the service industry, right? And then you'll see drunk football. And then they base their day on that. Like you said, they'll go home, hit their wife because their fucking team lost. It's like, that does not make any sense. I mean, it does because we're talking about how we are that, pick a side kind of, thing. And we have so much passion in that, but Jesus, man, that's a whole nother monster.
No, it is, man. I mean, I've come close to being in a few fights at games, which is good times sometimes, but I mean, boys want to have a little fun. But like you said, when people are getting stabbed in the parking lot, it's like, come on, dude. Like, So I mean, I think it does, create a culture of like just us versus them mentality, which can at times, be very dangerous.
Yeah, and I guess what I missed to say going back, and this relates to what we're talking about. It's like if you pick a side, either if you're right, left, Raiders, Chargers, whatever, you get there's no neutral. Sometimes, like especially in politics, I guess I should be more specific because right, they'll try to steer you. It's like, wait, you can't be neutral. Like, hold
Yeah.
on, you don't believe in that?
Yeah.
Fuck you. You have to almost, but it's like a canon. It's like you have to believe every single. You go down the checklist and you have to believe every single one, or you're not one of us.
Yeah.
Right? It's like a
Which is completely unrealistic. I mean, I have views that are in alignment with democratic and progressive values. I have views that are in alignment with conservative. That's just that's how people are, you know.
Yeah.
So to sit there and constrict and confine yourself to one particular set of beliefs that's probably where a lot of the dissonance comes from, and the anxiety and the tension comes from, because that's what's going on. You know, it's hard to do that. It's hard to say, okay, I believe in this and it'll never change. It's so limiting. It's, you know, I again, just sit back and sort of say, well, you know, I much more agree with these views, but that's not the end of the world if those views aren't adhered to by everyone else.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And
like
that's going back to identity. Right?
Yeah.
People,
And
ego. I think
yeah,
should
you know,
say,
and
yeah. All right, man. That's fuck. That was a great discussion, man.
Yeah, good talk, man. I had a great time.
That was awesome. Yeah, thank you for coming on. Thank you for your time, dude. You brought a lot of good insight. Like I said, this is like almost like not almost, but it's a self-improvement martial arts podcast. But I like to steer in all directions. You know, I'm interested in a lot of things, and this was a banger. Like I love doing these things where I venture off. Like I had a military guy over here that told me about his insights in like Afghanistan and stuff like that. It's just cool to hear those things and kind of venture off into other things once in a while. So thank you for coming.
definitely.
Man.
Thanks for having me.
Oh yeah, let's go.
All right.
Cool.